Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues, je suis ravie de...
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's an honor for me to welcome you to this webinar on Serial Transnational World Heritage Nomination and Properties. I am Regine van Driesch. I am the Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Belgium to UNESCO. And we organize this webinar in the framework of our candidacy to the World Heritage Committee for the period of 2021 to 2025. An interpretation in French and English is available. You can choose the language that you want to listen to. There is a globe at the bottom of the screen to choose your preferred language.
At the bottom of your screen. Le choix du thème d'aujourd'hui a été mûrement réfléchi avec nos experts et
the choice of this topic was reflected on with a series of experts, and it was an evidence. Why? Well, because for 20 years, Belgium has been wanting to nominate for the Serial Transnational World Heritage nomination. For instance, Belgium wanted to inscribe the Belgian belfries, and at the time it was a national project, and this was also to show that there were other belfries in the north of the country and in Netherlands. In 2005, a new series of French belfries was added, and the project was called the Belfries of Belgium and France. And so there we merged two national projects. Since then, things have evolved, and there are more serial transnational nominations, and these are more complex. Why? Well, because of the nature of the properties, the number of properties, the surface, and the number of countries concerned. And Belgium thinks that this project of serial transnational properties is promising. In fact, different countries work together to reach a common goal. What is this objective? Well, to conserve the site. And we all know, and the experts here today will talk about the experience, that putting in place this type of project is long, it's time-consuming, there is a cost, and sometimes lack of motivation is implied. So today we will talk about focal points, different projects, and different advisory bodies and other main stakeholders will participate today. This is why we're going to have a genuine dialogue, which will be constructive. We also wanted to work on a part which isn't talked about when we talk about serial transnational properties. It's the post-nomination. In fact, we put a lot of effort in the nomination project, but then we don't need to forget that we need to maintain the momentum for the network. We need to take into account governance and managing the network. The committee always has a very busy agenda, and the World Heritage Committee focuses on particular elements. And so sometimes the committee doesn't have time to reflect to put into perspective the different projects, to develop different argumentaries that could be used for other nominations. And so this is why we want to merge all these experience and foster this dialogue through this webinar. We believe that mutual understanding is crucial to put together the different positions, and these will be a foundation that we could use. And if we have some issues, then we could elaborate solutions together. We therefore hope to create the foundations of dialogue to understand better the conservation of our national heritage.
What Belgium aims at by being a candidate for the World Heritage Committee this year. We want the convention to be fully implemented by state parties. At the heart of our message today and throughout our campaign for the World Heritage Committee is the strong belief that open dialogue, constructive cooperation, and solidarity are essential to a vibrant and ever-relevant World Heritage Convention. Today's webinar, and you have seen the program, comprises two main parts. We will first hear the views of the World Heritage Center and one of its consultative bodies, ICOMOS, on the serial transnational nominations and properties. And then we will focus on two concrete examples of complex transnational files. Nous aurons d'abord un bien culturel, l'œuvre architecturale.
We will first have a cultural property. We will be talking about the architectural work of Le Corbusier. And this is a project which comprises 17 sites in 3 continents. And so this is a good example of multicultural cooperation. We'll also talk about a natural property. We'll be talking about the ancient and primeval beech forests of Carpathians and other regions of Europe. There, we have 94 components in 18 countries, and I think the group will become even bigger. Our second part, the second part of this webinar will be a round table, and the previous speakers will participate in that part, but we'll also have representatives of other serial transnational projects. We'll have, for example, the stone circles of Senegambia. There we have 4 archaeological sites which are located in Senegal and in Gambia. And there I want to underline the importance that Belgium gives to Africa as being part of the convention. And we hope that African sites are represented on World Heritage sites. We will also talk about other projects, for example, prehistoric pile dwellings around the Alps. There we have 17 sites, and this is often a very good example. I also hope that our colleagues from Argentina will be able to connect to this webinar. I know it's early for them, and they will talk to us about the Andean road system. These roads are more than 30,000 kilometers long. And finally, we'll talk about the frontiers of the Roman Empire. And this is the wall around the Roman Empire. This is also a site which is about 400 kilometers from the Rhenish Massif in Germany to the north sea coast in the Netherlands. And so I really think here that the involvement of the managers is crucial. And this is a project that was implemented in Great Britain.
Through the chat. So you are very welcome to participate to the discussion by raising questions through the chat and by giving us your reactions, your questions, your comments. Time permitting, we will try to answer those questions directly. If we are running out of time, we will contact you later. So I would like to wish you a very fruitful working session, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Je vous souhaite une excellente séance de travail et je me réjouis.
I wish you a great meeting, and I'm looking forward to looking at the conclusions. Maxime, you have the floor. Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Maxime Ouattara. I'm from the Wallonie-Bruxelles delegations in Belgium, and I'm glad to moderate this webinar today. We have more than 100 participants that have registered, so we would really like to thank all of you. We would also like to thank all the panelists, and we really try to create a webinar gathering people from different horizons. And so we're going to start now with a video of Alessandro Balsamo, who is from the UNESCO World Heritage Center. Good afternoon. I'm Alessandro Balsamo. I'm head of the unit in charge of the nomination process of sites on the World Heritage list within the UNESCO World Heritage Center. I would like to thank the Belgian authorities for organizing this meeting and for the invitation to participate. Serial transnational nominations are highly desirable to strengthen the international cooperation that is at the heart of the World Heritage Convention. The efforts of our ancestors, experts, and communities in all parts of the world have looked after these sites and landscapes for future generations in a cooperation exchange spirit that reflects the key element of the 1972 World Heritage Convention. Serial transnational nominations have become popular in recent years, clearly demonstrating the interest of countries in preserving the heritage shared between nations. The 1972 Convention is a powerful development tool that combines normative framework with the development of operational projects and concrete collaborations. Preserving and showcasing sites through the process of identifying values and attributes encourages everyone to care for heritage in an integrated and multidisciplinary way. The challenge is to develop comprehensive policies that integrate this approach. Serial properties play an important role in the future of the World Heritage Convention. This concept is an important innovation in the World Heritage system as it acknowledges the outstanding universal value in a series of thematically related sites and provides a mechanism to encourage consistency and cooperation in their protection and management. Consequently, serial nominations are an appropriate mechanism for heritage whose outstanding universal value is showcased at the scale of several sites. In other words, they are key values that cannot be demonstrated through a single property alone. In accordance with paragraph 138 of the operational guidelines, a nominated serial property may be located within the territory of a single state party. It is therefore a serial national property, or on the territory of different state parties, not necessarily having contiguous borders, and should be nominated with the consent of all state parties concerned. It is therefore a serial transnational property. The definition of serial properties, whether national or transnational, in paragraph 137, of the operational guidelines indicates that these include component parts that are linked together because they belong to the same cultural historic group and or because they reflect social or functional links over time, which generate landscape, ecological, evolutionary, or habitat connectivity. However, in the case of serial sites, a coherent presentation should be proposed to avoid excessive fragmentation of the component parts, taking into account the overall management capacity. Each component part must contribute to the outstanding universal value of the property as a whole in a substantial, scientific, easily defined, and visible way, including inter alia intangible attributes. But in serial properties, it is the series as a whole and not necessarily its individual parts that is of outstanding universal value. In terms of challenges, although serial transnational nominations are highly desirable to enhance international cooperation, their benefits need to be assessed in relation to the resources required to research, to nominate, to evaluate, and to manage the component parts. Serial nominations are generally more complex and challenging than single nominations. Sometimes there may also be questions about their practicality. Serial nominations can have significant resource implications to assess, to prepare strategic and thematic principles, to prepare the nomination, to manage, and to coordinate. A cautious approach is therefore needed to encourage the nomination of serial properties. This is particularly the case for complex nominations, such as the number of criteria, especially when mixed sites are proposed, the number of component parts, the number of state parties, and the distance between the different component parts. We should also note that serial properties would cause inflation of the World Heritage List because of the number of component parts they could include. And we know that some of these properties include tens and sometimes hundreds of component parts. Previous analysis have shown that many serial goods do not have comprehensive management systems that meet the requirements of the operational guidelines. It is for this reason that much attention is now being paid to the fact that a serial property management system should at least ensure that management of all component parts is harmonized to bring together a set of objectives aimed at the preservation of outstanding universal value. It also needs to ensure that threats to the property are identified and how we need to respond them, and also ensure that monitoring and reporting are coordinated. Because of their complexity, serial nominations should follow principles such as ensuring a minimal time frame required for work on the nomination of a property to be complete, the need to complete the comparative analysis at the earliest possible stage, noting that this should preferably be done before including the potential property on the indicative list. But there's also the identification of the likely costs of preparation and assessment and how these costs might be met, noting that these costs for complex serial properties may be much greater than for normal nominations. Paragraph 114 of the operational guideline also states that In the case of serial properties, a management system or mechanism ensuring the coordinated management of the different components are essential and should be documented in the nomination. A number of difficulties may arise in establishing a coordinated management system, such as the different political, legal, and social characteristics of the various state parties involved in the nomination, the different characteristics of the specific communities and stakeholders involved in the management of the elements that make up the serial transnational nomination, substantial differences between the nominated elements in terms of size, territorial relationships, but also logistics issues related to communication and joint management arrangements. There are also advantages of the serial approach. As you know, serial transnational nominations are encouraged by the World Heritage Committee. This way, state parties who are co-authors of a serial transnational nomination can appoint among themselves or by mutual agreement the state party that is the bearer of this nomination. Such a nomination may therefore be registered exclusively under the quota of the state party, which is the bearer. This decision of the committee has had an impact, as shown by the increasing number of transnational nominations in recent years, some of which involve a large number of component parts and state parties. Surely, being part of one of these serial projects, whether at the national or international level, highlights the concept behind the idea of the World Heritage Convention, cooperation in safeguarding our heritage. Thank you. I wish you a fruitful meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Balsamo. It was very interesting to have your point of view. You have mentioned the different challenges, but also the advantages of such a registration, including cooperation for the preservation and protection of our heritage. We will now move on and listen to the advisory bodies, and I would give the floor to the representative of e-commerce, Regina Durigelo. Regina, you have the floor. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, e-commerce, thank you very much for having been invited to this webinar. Today, we will present the issues, or rather the challenges and the opportunities that we have. But first of all, let me tell you that there are not a lot of serial properties that are registered on the World Heritage list at the moment. Several serial registrations have been made, and even if they are interesting, they are sometimes challenging. But before talking about the challenges, maybe let's look at some of the operational guidelines for cultural properties. Mr. Balsamo mentioned several of the articles of the operational guidelines. Sorry, I have some issues with my PowerPoint presentation. I cannot go to the next slide. Don't manage. Oh, there we go. There we go. Sorry, my apologies. So I was talking about the operational guidelines, and different provisions mention serial properties. The serial properties can be presented in different ways. as it is said in Article 137. But there are also other articles that talk about the serial properties. Indeed, some of the guidelines have been modified after a conference. Indeed, revisions were made in 2011 reflecting the outcomes of the Itigen International Meeting. There are a lot of operational guidelines, including some regarding management of those serial transnational properties. We also have some specific provisions for transboundary properties and transnational properties. The goal is always to also create some management committees. The World Heritage Committee also took some decisions and refer to the serial transnational nominations. They said that it may benefit from an agreed nomination strategy before the official submission. Before mentioning the challenges and the issues, let me remind to you, generally speaking, that everybody agrees on the fact that joining different partners on such a project requires extra efforts in terms of resources and time. It takes more time than an individual registration. Complexities increase when more than one state party is involved. It requires professional expertise, but also some type of availability in terms of human resources, diplomacy, and it also requires a long-term political support. Therefore, the implementation of a permanent system of preservation and protection of the properties require extra efforts in terms of coordination of the different institutional bodies, whether at the national, regional, or international level. We have noticed that to ensure an efficient coordination, it was necessary to know the property, its attributes, and its mapping, so to speak, in the different countries. So you need to know how the property works, operates as a system. All the partners that are involved in those properties should know the property as a whole and all its components. The second aspect that seems important to me is the knowledge of the different management systems that exist in the different state parties that are involved. It allows you to understand the constraints and the opportunities that you have when it comes to transborder cooperation. The implementation of exchanges, for instance, on communication, interpretation of the property, are very useful as well. It is important to have such information exchanges, not only when problems arise, but on the long term, on a continuous basis. Moreover, the vision of the property must be shared. So you must reflect on how the different partners and stakeholders understand the property, and you need to understand what the different partners want to do with the property. Now, let's look at some of the challenges that pose such properties. First of all, you have the challenge of the harmonization of heritage protection systems. The definition of common principles for conservation, management, and interpretation are based on the OU, the outstanding universal value. The goal is to harmonize the results. But to do that, you need to exchange, to ensure dialogue with the different partners. You need to understand the different legal institutional systems of the state parties. This way you can identify the needs and the gaps at all levels, whether at the property level or at the component level. This can help you find solutions to overcome the barriers, and this will allow you to focus on common principles in order to reach common results. Sometimes such challenges are look difficult to overcome. But those challenges can be overcome. Transnational collaboration can also help raise awareness and make people understand that it is important to improve those heritage protection systems. Focusing on common goals and results for the preservation and protection of our heritage through appropriate tools is a good way to ensure proper coordination, even when the systems are different. The second challenge that we have also noted is the one of good exchanges and collaboration. It is often said that it is not easy to ensure an efficient dialogue between the different components of a transnational series through time. However, coordination and shared governance can bring the state parties to work properly. But to do so, they need to commit to invest time in order to implement structures and coordinated governance systems. Such a common work fosters dialogue and professional relationships, which are key in order to ensure long-term collaboration once the nomination and registration have been done. Moreover, it is important to maintain the vitality of the collaboration with clear tasks at all levels of the management structure, whether at the national, regional, or international level. It is also important to draft an action plan to ensure continuous collaboration with all the partners. Moreover, the property can be used to foster dialogue and collaboration between different partners. Indeed, partners can get along and agree on common objectives and common actions that can be carried out in research projects, education projects. They can also organize exchanges between experts or between cities and so on. The third challenge that has been identified is the one of the establishment and maintenance of transnational coordination committees for the management of the properties, especially after registration on the list of the World Heritage. Indeed, such committees require time and investment to make sure that everything is clearly understood at all levels. Such coordination committees have to face different challenges. They also have to share responsibilities, have a proper knowledge of the policy and operational aspects. Moreover, serial transnational properties show us that a proper collaboration is possible only when the different partners understand the challenges faced by the other partners. It is important to planify and plan collaboration. This is especially true when it comes to protection systems and the way in which the different factors are tackled. The preparation of periodic reports offer us a possibility to strengthen or renew partnerships and collaborations. Experience proved us that a clear distinction between the different issues that have to be tackled at the national and international level is necessary to exploit properly international collaboration. At the transnational level, collaboration also allows the identification of the following key principles. All the state parties take ownership of the national issues while informing all the partners, all the stakeholders, by giving them also a chance to help solve the problems. Moreover, the state parties must feel commonly responsible to the UNESCO. All the transnational challenges and issues that involve more than one component or one state party must be tackled at the international level. Moreover, it is recommended to implement a multi-state structure that aims at taking decisions when conflicts arise between site managers at the transnational level. So beyond those coordination committees, it is also important to support and stimulate expert exchanges in order to promote a high-level dialogue. It can be done through expert meetings or seminars. This can have long-term benefits, and this helps solve problems in a creative way. It is important to ensure such a proper management at the transnational level. This helps solve problems. This can also, in some cases, be a determining factor to encourage the respect of Article 172 of the operational guidelines. Let me tackle another challenge now, which is the one of information exchanges on development projects and potential threats. There are gaps in information exchanges on development projects between the state parties, and this represents some threats. We can understand that this is a sensitive issue. However, to overcome those gaps, to fill those gaps, it is important to follow some principles and to consider communication systems and reporting systems between the different partners on any issue regarding preservation and protection of the World Heritage. Indeed, a threat on one of the components can have an impact on the whole property. This is why it is important to tackle such threats at the transnational level and to share information on such threats. Moreover, the different stakeholders must have the possibility to exchange information on other topics during meetings that gather all the stakeholders. Finally, one last remark on one of the other challenges that we are facing, which is the one of harmonizing conservation management approaches. Indeed, the harmonization of conservation and management approaches is a key factor, especially when the individual component management is different from one country to another. It is important to eliminate the barriers in order to ensure a coordinated approach based on common preservation and protection principles based on the outstanding universal value. Such harmonization can require a lot of time. Attention and effort most of the time focus on the harmonization, coordination of the management, on the mechanisms, and on the follow-up, because these are considered as relevant aspects at the transnational level, especially when it comes to periodic reports. To conclude, on a very optimistic note, transnational serial properties are powerful drivers of a scientific cooperation at the national and international level. No doubt on this. However, some theoretical and practical aspects of these specific types of properties would merit further exploration. Observations that were made in this presentation come from our analysis of transnational serial properties, but also from experience sharing meetings. Given that we've held different seminars on experience sharing, such meetings have been organized thanks to the Walloon region. I hope and I am convinced that study cases on serial transnational properties presented today will illustrate all the challenges I've mentioned and the way they've been tackled by the different state parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this comprehensive overview. We were able to focus on the different issues. We talked about cooperation, and thank you for talking about this study financed by Wallonia. So we are now going to give some concrete examples from advisory bodies. And so I would now like to give the floor to Bénédicte Gandini, who is an architect from the Foundation Le Corbusier. And she will be talking about the architectural work of Le Corbusier, an outstanding contribution to the modern movement. You have the floor, Mrs. Gandini. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation. I will now share my screen. Can you all see my screen? Okay, I hope this works. So thank you for inviting me to present the nomination. Now, just as a little reminder to begin, the architectural work of Le Corbusier was nominated in July 2016. It was a serial transnational nomination, and it is the fruit of a collective work. I find that this is important to underline. And it was a work coordinated amongst the different countries: India, Japan, Argentina, France, Switzerland, France. And so there are 17 sites in 7 countries and in 3 continents. These works were realized in a very long period of time by Le Corbusier. And it really concerns the whole world. And we see how the works of Le Corbusier influenced the world. Each component part of the series contributes to the outstanding universal value. What's important to note So, as I said, this work started at the beginning of the years 2000. It started in France. It was first an isolated proposal. It was for a chapel. Then there was a proposal for the Firminy site. And so the culture ministry realized that there was something at stake, and so we should participate in the discussion of the evolution of World Heritage. And they thought that these types of works should be recognized in the whole world. And instead of recognizing just one artwork, then they thought they should work on series. And so this is what we worked on. This is what the Le Corbusier Foundation did. The foundation really represents the legacy of the architect. And in this institution, we have the experts of the works of Le Corbusier. And so the culture ministry worked with the foundation, and we've created a first list. Now, the list evolved from the year 2000 to now. Now, the date to remember is 2004, because this was the first meeting that was launched with all the ambassadors of all of the countries where there is a building of Le Corbusier. So there were the 7 countries cited, but there was also Tunisia, the United States, Iraq, and Russia. And this meeting started this collaborative work and this common work. And the countries which were interested and who wanted to participate joined during this meeting. So these 7 countries organized themselves to create a work group. There were some representatives of the Foundation Le Corbusier. There were also some representatives of the ministry. Meetings were organized, and every 3 or 4 months, the working group got together in Paris to look into the nomination, the text, the proposals of each state party. I think it's crucial to remind this, because the Le Corbusier Foundation was already in touch with the managers and with the experts, and there was also moral rights which were taken into account, because there's the question of conservation that needs to be into account. And they started to face challenges, some of the challenges. Now, I'm not going to talk about the entire candidacy, but just a quick note to say that there were two candidacies, and that failed actually, and this really made us think of what was working, that made us realize that there were some differences in the buildings. In the first nomination, we had 22 buildings. So there was some buildings in Marseille, for instance. But we also presented some minor components, and they had they were obsolete in terms of heritage, in the heritage point of view. But all of these buildings enabled us to give an answer to the evolution of the modern society in the 20th century. This enabled us to develop new concepts, and we realized that all these buildings had an influence in the world, and they also shared and showed ideas of the modern movement. Now, we talked about the diversity of the different components, but the size was also taken into account. There are, for instance, here the Maison Guietta in Antwerp in Belgium. This is a private house and it's open to visit only if you take an appointment. Now we also have other buildings such as the Museum of Western Art in Tokyo, which of course is open to the public. Now, the main challenge was the management system. And so from 2009, we started facing this challenge. And so we worked on mapping and on management plans. All this work was done in collaboration, but each member state, each state party showed their own reflection on each component part. So very quickly, let me give you an example of the mapping. So here you can see that it's done based on the same model for France and for Germany. Now, of course, there are the stakes are very different. Here you can see that there are, for example, 50 houses. So starting from 2009, we really worked on mapping, but we also worked on management plans. So for instance, we offered a model, a template kind of, that state parties could use in order to work on a management plan. So this management plan has to be similar from one country to another, but even if the issues are different from one country to another. This reflection was quite long, and this enabled us to make a connection between the 7 state parties. These state parties get together every year to talk about the different projects on each site. And the foundation Le Corbusier was identified as the connection between these links. It's actually a historical connection. It's not something that was created. It was something that exists since Le Corbusier died in 1965. And so this foundation really makes a connection between the different management, the local communities, and the experts. This work enables us to have some kind of management, even if it's not perfect, but this enables us to exchange regularly. The managers are also connected to the site, and since 2009, we have created these management plans which really support the managers, but we also include the inhabitant associations. There's also the European Federation of the Inhabitants and the Landlords Association, which exists now which has existed now for 15 years. And all of these stakeholders get together yearly, and this was also the case during COVID. So this really shows that there is a strong bond between all the state parties, and this collaboration enables us to have first an international management plan. This also enabled us to create 16 local management plans. There were 10 that were created in France, and all these elements were created thanks to the foundation Le Corbusier, which gets together all of these stakeholders. And so, as I said, since 2009, we really focus on the management plans. I don't think that I still have time, so I'm going to stop here, and I'm available if you still have questions.
Gandini, c'était très intéressant d'avoir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gandini. It was very interesting to have such experience sharing. You overcame a lot of challenges, and you've been resilient to succeed. Such resilience is necessary when it comes to transnational serial properties, but this is a very good example of components on 3 different components. It was very interesting on 3 different continents. Thank you very much. We will now move on with another case study, which is on the ancient and primeval beech forests of the Carpathians and other regions of Europe. It was a true challenge as well. That nomination was done step by step. Now there are 18 countries and a lot of component parts, and I will give the floor first of all to Anna Kovarovic. Ms. Kovarovic, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me? Yes, okay. So I'll start directly with my presentation. I will share my presentation with Caroline Selis, and she will take over after 7 minutes, I hope. Okay, so to start the presentation, okay, just a short introduction of who we are. We are a company called ECO Institute of Ecology. We are based in Austria, and we work in the field, we're specialized in the fields of planning and managing protected areas. We work in the field of World Heritage sites for 10 years already, and we did some nominations, some feasibility studies, and also the management of the some of the World Heritage sites. To start with our example, which is the ancient and primeval beech forest of the Carpathians and other regions of Europe today, I have a short introduction in the development of the site. So everything started in 2007 in Slovakia and the Ukraine Carpathians, where they got some forests on the list, mainly the outstanding universal value was mainly about undisturbed ecological processes in these primeval intact forests there. In 2011, there was the first extension of this serial site, which was done in Germany. 5 forests in Germany were then part of this World Heritage site. And with this extension nomination, the outstanding universal value changed. It changed, or there was something was added more or less. So the undisturbed ecological processes, of course, were still part of the outstanding universal value, but what came additionally was the recolonization of Europe after the last ice age. So the beech trees had some refuge areas in the southern part of Europe during the last ice age, and from there on they recolonized the whole continent. And with the World Heritage site of the beech forests, this process, which is still ongoing, is shown with different forests on the beaches way up to the northern part of Europe. What is also interesting, I think, for transnational nominations is that then a screening process was started. So after the second extension, IUCN and UNESCO requested a screening process where in whole Europe, where suitable forests to display the outstanding universal value should be found. There were more than 200 experts in Europe working on this screening process. There were criteria for these forests. For example, there was no forest management. So of course they need management of the protected area, but no forest management should take place. The age of the forest was important. It must be a protected area. At least 30% of the forests must be with the beech tree, and additional criteria Out of that came a long list with about 150 areas, possible forests to extend this World Heritage Site and to represent the OUV accordingly. And then there was another meeting with the experts, and the outcome was the so-called Vienna shortlist. And there it was about 30 possible areas which could be the extensions to the World Heritage Site to show this OUV. And the first extension started then in 2017 with 9 more states parties. So then it was 12 states parties and 78 component parts. And 2021, there were 6 more states parties. So now, as already said, there are 94 component parts and 18 European states parties together in one transnational serial site, which is of course, a complicated situation and a very interesting one for the management. With Caroline, we'll talk about that. And I will now tell something about the practical part of the nomination. So what did we do to do these extension nominations? So a very important part was the coordination and the communication, of course, with these lots of languages and people from different states parties. So the first part was always to get letters of interest from the participating states parties. So who is interested in joining the extension nomination? This is important to have some kind of a commitment from the states parties to see who is really interested in being part of it. Then we got the contact persons. We then created a handbook for all the participating states parties where the nomination process is shown, where the needed documents are listed, and where the texts, so which texts will they have to write and what are the number of words they can use, that they know what is the amount of work they will have to do. And then we create an online database where everything could be put in. So the documents, the pictures, the texts. There was also an online GIS system where we could get the maps from. So not everybody does their own maps. And there was also a feedback system inside this platform. So this is how the platform looked like or looks like. Everybody got access to this platform and we could see in time who is putting in which information, what is missing. And a very important part was we could limit the number of characters and words they could put in so that all of the texts are more or less in the same length and that every text has the same quality. The nomination dossier was then put together with the information from the database. As said, we had one central GIS system to provide the maps and the size of the property, and we put everything together, had a check by all states parties, did an editing, printed it, and then at the end it was more or less a document of 500 pages, which was delivered to Paris, and there it was signed by all states parties. And what is also very important, to get the letters of all states parties of the existing property that they are in line with this new extension. So a lot of coordination work. Also very important for the nominations is the evaluation. So the communication with IUCN and the states parties is very important, putting together possible routes and support everybody with the organization and the program, and also to accompany the IUCN experts was from our point of view a very important step. And the lessons learned, so I can conclude and give over to Caroline. What was very important for us to learn in these processes was that the online editorial database is very helpful to have an overview. There are no problems with different versions when you're working on Google Words or shared documents. It's always complicated with these different versions. We don't have this with the database, and it's easy manageable to have this data repository. Also very important for us to learn, we usually communicate on expert level. We learned that also we have to communicate on UNESCO level, on the level of the states parties, on the level of experts and the protected areas. Everybody must be very well informed to make such a nomination a success. And also the evaluation is not to be underestimated. It must be very well organized. The travel to sites must be very well organized, and the first impression of the experts is very important in that case. Okay, so with this, I thank you, and I take Caroline, you take over. Shall I share your presentation? You do it?
I can do it, thank you.
Okay, no perfect. So it's yours.
Okay, so thank you, Anna. I just have 1 or 2 slides just to explain one practical thing on how we try to manage our most complex World Heritage series in the world, apparently. The one challenge we had was to work on a guidance document on buffer zone management. So we all know that every UNESCO World Heritage site should be surrounded by some kind of buffer area. Of course, in the natural setting, it's also important to promote all kinds of natural processes and to avoid all risk, of course, on the protected area. In theory, that's really simple. But in our context, it was before the last inscription, we were with 12 different countries. Yeah, you can imagine there are forests especially in the eastern part of Europe, which are literally thousands of hectares, but we also have small forests. There are forests located in mountains, forests located close to major cities like Brussels. There are also economic realities of all the countries are different. So it's not easy to reach consensus in this variety of countries. I will show you on the next slide all the different steps we took, but it took 3 years, but we managed to reach consensus. And I think the most important thing we did was to create a kind of glossary, because we realized that there are a lot of foresters in our team, but they didn't understand each other, because something in German is different than in French or in English. So we created a common language. I think that was really important to find consensus. We also had a lot of workshop with technical experts, because all the solutions we had to come up with has to be realistic. It has to be feasible in the field. But on the other hand, they also have to be ambitious enough, because we all know we'll need our old forests to survive climate change. So it was a difficult to find the equilibrium between being ambitious enough and being realistic. So that's why it took quite some time. There also was some work on literature review and a lot of feedback sessions with different state parties. And just to give you an idea on all different steps it took. So this is like we started in 2018, and then we go to, it goes on and on and on. But in 2021, we managed to find a consensus, and now the document is sent to IUCN. So we are hoping to have a feedback really soon. So my major message for you all today is like, it is possible to work together, even if in a series with 20 different languages. It just takes some time, and it just takes a lot of collaboration. So that was it for me.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Céline. Thank you very much, Ms. Celis. That's very interesting. It was really a very. Je vais continuer en français. C'était vraiment.
So I will continue into French. And I really appreciated when you explained that first we had to understand each other. We needed to create a glossary. And so we really see how powerful these things are. We have different countries that are involved sometimes. And so what we really need to try and find out is to understand each other. And so it's great that you created this glossary tool. That was really extraordinary. So congratulations for doing this. So we've talked about a natural property, we've talked about a cultural property, and now we're going to move on to the round table. Let me just first introduce the four speakers. These four speakers represent transnational sites. First, we have the stone circles of Senegambia. This is quite an extraordinary site. We have more than 1,000 components on Senegal and in Senegal and Gambia. You really can see here how well the stone was carved, and this is something that's existed for millennia. Now, we will then talk about prehistoric pile dwellings around the Alps. And this means that the sites are on piles, and so there's an adjective palaphytic, which is used to describe this. And this shows the first type of lakeshore communities, and we can see that all the organic materials that were used, and this is often an example given to show management coordination. We then have a representative of the Andean road system. This is a road system of more than 30,000 kilometers, where in South America here, we see that these roads link the snow-capped peaks of the Andes, and it's pretty extraordinary because we are on a surface of 3.6 million hectares, so it's huge. And finally, we have a representative of the frontiers of the Roman Empire, the Lower German lines. As the ambassador said, it's during the second century that this started to flourish. It goes from the Rhenish Massif in Germany to the Black Sea. Here, we're going to really focus on the Netherlands and Germany. We have very interesting components here. So we will now give the floor to the different representatives of these sites. I wanted to organize this roundtable this way. We've heard a lot about the World Heritage Center. We've heard of the advisory bodies. We've heard of natural and cultural properties. We understood that it was crucial to be able to talk to each other, to understand each other. But now for these four sites that I've mentioned, during the nomination process, can you tell us what was the most positive point and what was your biggest challenge? Mr. Seydou Nourou Khan will be the first speaker, so you can now take the floor. Yes, we see you. Perfect. So you have 3 minutes to share your experience on the nomination process, what worked well, and what was the biggest challenge. Thank you, Mr. Kane. Sorry, Mr. Kane, but we can't hear you. Okay, so we will come back to you later if you don't mind. We'll try and solve this issue, and you'll have technical support. So I will then give the floor to Mrs. Barbara Fett. She will talk to us about the pile dwellings around the Alps. So please give us a bit of your experience? What were some positive aspects of the nomination? What were some of the challenges you faced? Thank you. All right, yes, good afternoon. So it's already been 10 years that our site was inscribed in the World Heritage. So neither me or neither our president was in charge of this process. But first, it was only just a few cantons in Switzerland who wanted to nominate for this. And this was at a time where we had the 150th anniversary of these pile dwelling sites in Switzerland. And the positive aspect was to reflect on this nomination. In fact, we asked the 5 other countries around Switzerland who also had pile dwellings if they wanted to participate. And so in a scientific point of view, it was wonderful to see that everyone wanted to work together for this nomination. However, and this was something that was mentioned during the introduction, it was not easy to find an international solution because we have different national structures. There were 6 countries involved, so the systems were quite different. There was this coordination problem there that arose for this nomination. And today we have 2 coordination groups. We have an international coordination group and a national coordination group in Switzerland. And these 2 groups manage research. They're in charge of mediation and of protecting the sites. Alongside this process of finding a common structure, another challenge was that we have more than 1,000 pile dwellings around the Alps. So this represents a lot of sites to manage, especially when we think of this in the long term. And so this is why we needed to choose the dwellings. And so first we had 156 sites, and then we had to reduce this figure to 100 sites in 6 countries. So the choice was difficult. Maybe one more thing. For archaeological sites, it's difficult to find an equivalence between protection and research, because sometimes when we research, we can destroy some materials on sites. So it's sometimes difficult to strike a balance between the 2. And we really tried to choose what to do there. And we decided to maybe leave sites which were well preserved, to not destroy too much material, authentic material. And these materials, you know, have lasted more than 5,000 years in the ground. So that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you for this complete reply. Yes, so you're right. The choice isn't always easy. We've talked about this with the Le Corbusier Foundation. We will now move on with a very large site as well. So I now suggest to fly over the Atlantic and to give the floor to Victoria Sosa.
Give us your opinion.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. My English is a bit rusty, so please, I apologize. Well, about the nomination process, Capagnan, the Andean road system, took 12 years of the nomination process until it was inscribed in the list. And now it's been 5 years of the inscription. And so 12 years, I could speak hours about challenges and problems we had during the nomination process. But if I think in a positive thing we had is that strong technical team. International team with many professions, archaeologists, architects, sociologists, anthropologists, and we really work as a one team. So maybe still now, if I have any problem with my site, I might call an archaeologist in Argentina, which is my country, or even somebody in Colombia or somebody in Peru, because we really work as a team, even though along all those years, we had many political issues among our countries, even problems with national limits. So, you know, politics maybe were against our project of the nomination, but we managed to go on. And I think the most difficult thing, as I remember, was to convince, we really had a hard time to convince the committee and ICOMOS that for us, the criteria number 6, the intangible cultural heritage associated to this road, was very important to us, because they asked us to show them in each side how intangible heritage was represented, but it's not really how a serial nomination works. And so for us, it was very important that the specific world vision of Andean communities, which is still present today, and today is very important to talk about their vision in this global ecological crisis. So for us, it was very important that the criteria 6 was included, and we managed to do it at the last minute, but we did it, and it was very difficult to us.
Thank you very much for your input. Now I propose to move back to another continent and closer to Europe. Monsieur Kahn, si vous nous entendez, je vous demande donc de nous donner un peu votre...
Mr. Kahn, if you can hear us, can you talk about your experience in Senegal and give us what was the positive aspect and the negative aspect in the nomination process? Thank you for your contribution. Go ahead, Mr. Kahn, if it works, go ahead. Okay, so technical support will take care of that.
From Program Manager Limes at the Dutch Limes Association. So if you can also share your experience in the inscription process, what was the most positive and what was the most challenging issue that you had to face? Thank you, Mr. Limes.
Thank you, Mr. Worten. I think in the way of a positive thing, when we started nominating the Lower German limes, there were already other parts of the frontier of the Roman Empire inscribed, and a lot of work was done already on those nominations. One of the most important things is that already in 2005, far before we started, there was a agreed concept of what the frontier would be like, and that we would only look at sites relevant at the second age in our history. So those frames worked very good as a starting point. And I think another positive thing also is that we work together with our German partners, and that is a very positive vibe. So if you have positive vibes on both sides of the border, it makes working for such a long period more fun and more productive. challenges, like my colleague from South America already said, if you work 10 years on a project, there are a lot of challenges, so it was difficult to choose. But one of the main challenges was that because we were adding something to an already existing site, Frontiers of the Roman Empire, it was very difficult to prove which OUV we had and what we would contribute to the already existing OUV. So especially in the first years, there was a lot of discussion also with ICOMOS, and the thematic study that was already mentioned in an earlier phase really broke that impasse. So I think that was a big challenge. And a second challenge is that although we are on a colleague level very good working with our German partners, the way in how we interact with our inhabitants is very different. I think Germany is more top down, while the Dutch are more bottom up. So that, especially in making the management plan, gave a lot of problems in how to come to a common approach.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's when we are working with transnational, there are a lot of cultural aspects who are taking place, and it's interesting to say that the cultural aspect, the way to interact with inhabitants, are in shaping the management plan that has an impact, but that's also the beauty of this project, because you need to adjust not only on, I would say, on the content of it, but on the way of working, and that's why it offers this kind of inscription, offers an opportunity for cooperation and exchange in its way of doing. We still have difficulties. On a toujours des difficultés à contacter Monsieur Khan au niveau de la connexion.
So it's still difficult to contact Mr. Khan. So I hope that he will send me his inputs and I will share them with you. So we are now move on to the second question. So once the site is inscribed, what are the main challenges that you can face, and what are the benefits of site registration? For example, in Belgium, the city of Spa was inscribed in the cities in Europe with terms, and it took a very long time. It's always a very long process, and so we want to know what you feel in terms of management, what you think the benefits are once the nomination took place. And so I will now ask Karim Gernigan from the pile dwellings to share his experience, and then Barbara Fatta could complete, and then we will move on to another site.
Yes, Gernigan, thank you. No problem for the mispronunciation. So you were talking about the challenges. Actually, we didn't face that many challenges, but rather benefits. Indeed, in terms of governance, we had no major issue. As Barbara said, we had an international coordination body that was set up. Moreover, we were meeting twice a year. Barbara was ensuring proper coordination. So in terms of governance, we had good governance. Obviously, there are some difficulties linked to the different responsibilities that we have in one state, within the state. But there are benefits. You know, our heritage is invisible because it is underwater, but it is very important for the history of our societies, because pile dwellings are linked to the agrarian lakeshore communities, which were among the first communities in Europe. Most sites have not been preserved except around the Alps. And this is why it is a key heritage, even if it's not very visible. Now that we are registered in the World Heritage, we have more visibility vis-à-vis decision makers, the authorities, but also the public, the general public. So this helped us overcome the challenge of invisibility. Moreover, we have more than 100 sites that have been included in that property, but they were even more potentially. So that's the first aspect I wanted to mention. Then, given that we are underwater, it is sometimes difficult to identify buffer zones that are efficient. They're efficient when you have a human action, direct action, so we can make some protections, but there are limitations when it comes to a contamination through water, or things that go beyond the theoretical limits that we can set in a lake, for instance. So these aspects are difficult to manage, but being part of the World Heritage help us highlight the importance of our property. So we are doing our best to protect those sites. Moreover, our sites, the components are within a natural environment. Sometimes it represents a constraint because you don't always have the same water levels, and the water levels may differ whether you have to protect some so-called buildings, the pile dwellings, or natural goods. Maybe Barbara has something else to say. Well, thank you very much. Indeed, you said most of it. But it is great to see that 10 years later, collaboration is still going very well. Collaboration was not only set at the beginning. At the beginning, obviously, everybody was committed, wanted to register in the World Heritage List. But collaboration continues, and we are very happy about that. Moreover, we have a great understanding between the different countries. So it helps us work both at the national level and at the international level. Indeed, with our coordination group and our network, we help each other. We have specialists, we have experts within reach that we can reach out to in case of any issue. This is why I would say we are lucky. We are 6 countries, but we are linked through the Alps, and this helps us a lot. Thank you very much. I will try to give the floor to Mr. Khan once again. Mr. Khan, please try to connect. Please turn your mic on. We'll give it one more try. No feedback at the moment. We will move forward.
Back to Latin America with Ms. Victoria Sosa for the Andean Roots Network. So if you can tell us, since the inscription of the Andean Roots, what have been the main challenges in terms of governance and management, and the main benefits of this inscription, because it's very large, it's a big site, and how it happened, and how it was experienced by the different countries of the Andean Roots. Thank you.
Yes, Capacñán Andean Road System has 137 serial components and more than 300 archaeological sites associated to the road. So it's very huge in 6 countries. So we work a lot for the nomination file. And then once it was inscribed in the list, we think, well, now we manage, but then the state of conservation reports came. We are a really observed site. We have to report every 2 years. We have to prepare a state of conservation report every 2 years. So for us, it's a big challenge that it takes us a lot of time and of course a lot of money, because much of the work we do is really to respond to the committee recommendations. So in terms of management, I think for all serial sites, we have to deal with the each specific serial component. So in conservation, risk preparedness, heritage impact assessment. So we have to have the focus on each serial component, but at the same time, we need to think as a whole. So we need to do average reports of conservation, average reports of risk preparedness. So it's difficult sometimes to define how is the middle point between 137 component states of conservation. That's a big challenge. I think one of the best benefits, I'm a sociologist, so maybe I focus more on local communities, is that in the middle of the nomination process, we managed to change the focus of our interest from the object of heritage to the subject of heritage. So we really start hard working with local communities, not only to know their point of view about this site and to recall all the local values about the Andean road system, but also to actually sit them in the table where decisions are made. Indigenous communities are seated in the board where we take decisions. And for them, especially in Argentina, it meant that the inscription to the list gave them a visibility and their culture a visibility in countries where sometimes, indigenous people are keeping apart, or they are focused on the capital cities. To show all the diversity these countries have, I think it's a big goal the nomination gave us.
Thank you very much, Ms. Souza. I think we see some link with the previous intervention with the inscriptions gives visibility to the site, and that's something positive. It can be visibility of the local community, indigenous community, but also as Mr. Jarnigon just mentioned, to show to the states the importance of the site, and that can be very relevant, and that's how it is useful. I will try, Mr. Ken, can you try again to contact us? Monsieur Ken, vous pouvez essayer de mettre le son?
Could we try one more time to connect Mr. Akane? You have to activate your mic. Please turn your mic on. We may try once again later on, and I will now give the floor to Mr. Manier.
The Dutch Limes and Association to also share their experience once their site has been registered. Mrs. Lin, if you can share the challenges and the benefits since the inscription.
Well, we were just inscribed this summer, so it is very difficult to already point out clear advantages. However, I did like what Mr. Jernigan, I hope I pronounced it well, said that we also have like invisible heritage. It's good to say that in preparing the nominations, we took a lot of lessons also from the file dwellings. And we looked a lot in their file, and you see that although it is invisible, by making it UNESCO World Heritage, local communities feel that they really have something special. So in that way, it more or less makes it more visible. So I hope that will be a benefit. But that still has to be proven. And when I look at the challenges, I think that the words of Ms. Regina Durigello were very true, that already now it's a challenge to keep the network alive and to keep it vital. and to also make clear that it's not only getting a label or a brand, but it brings obligations. And it is very hard work to make that concept understood at all levels. So not only at the institutions and universities, because they understand, and they understand the importance of research, but also at the local communities. I remember that I think 2 days after the inscription was a fact, I already received the first email of one of the municipalities that they were very positive and that they saw this as an impulse to do research and dig all the archaeology out of the ground to make it more visible. So you see that you have to keep on making people aware what it means to take care of the heritage in a good way. So I think we have a lot of challenges there.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor again to Mr. Khan. If you can active, Mr. Khan, si vous pouvez activer votre.
Mr. Khan, please turn your mic on if you can. Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your patience. Wonderful, we can hear you. We are thrilled to hear you. Well, I'll try to be as quick as possible. So, the stone circles of Senegambia are based in Gambia and Senegal. It includes different sites, burial sites that represent stone circles. They are still a mystery for the researchers. Many sites have been identified, and they are grouped in 4 groups, 2 in Senegal, 2 in Gambia. We have Sinen, Ngayene, Wanar, Wasu, and Kerbach. These are the 4 groups. And each group include several stone circles. We have all the stone circles that are in a band that is 100 kilometers wide along some 350 kilometers of the river Gambia. The benefits that we have identified with the nomination are the following. You know, we've always attracted visitors. So the stone circles have always attracted visitors. But they are now even more visible. It is clear that those stone circles are historically very important for both Gambia and Senegal. Both countries are linked by their geography. Now, thanks to that registration, we've had a strengthening of the social links between the different Gambian and Senegalese communities. The 2 state parties have worked upstream and have collaborated to make sure they could promote those sites. Several meetings have been organized at the local level in Wanar, Senegambia, and so on. And we created links between the communities of both countries. At first, the communities didn't exactly know about those sites. And thanks to our nomination, we raised awareness of the local communities. At the transnational level, now both countries are very committed. We are making sure that those sites are available. We've invested a lot of means to ensure the availability, but also the preservation and protection of those sites. What are the main challenges? Main challenges are to work on with an economic momentum, so to speak. Indeed, we need an economic dynamic. What we mean by that is that we want the local communities to take ownership of that registration, so that this can improve their social and economic situation. At the very moment, we are building an interpretation center in Ouanar and in Senegambia in Senegal. In Gambia, they did the same in Wassou and Kerbach. So the four groups of sites have an interpretation center. Moreover, we are working with the Ministry of Culture to keep developing those the sites that we have in Senegal, meaning Senegambia and Ouanar. We want a building where people can eat, drink, and even sleep. This is what we are trying to do. We will also promote local meals. The money, the revenues from such buildings will be for the local communities. Moreover, we have other programs of bike tours, the goal being to visit different stone circles. Unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, some of our projects have been impeded, but they are still on the way. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you again very much for your patience. And sorry, I couldn't connect earlier. Thank you very much. Very interesting, Mr. Khan. It was very interesting. And it is great to see the diversity of our panel. Indeed, we've talked about the local communities and the way they have to take ownership of those projects. It's very interesting to see that it is happening in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa. Such transnational serial sites help gather us, gather the communities, and communities are part of the 5 C's that you know so well. Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. We've received a couple of questions in the chat for all our panelists. Have you created a coordination system?
Series, like people whose only job is to assist site manager, raise with focal points and UNESCO? And if it's the case, how many people are involved? Who pay them? What is your experience in that? Maybe we can start with Barbara Fat. Madame Fat, si vous pouviez partager votre expérience des sites panafricains.
Ms. Fat, maybe you can share your experience in that regard. Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. We have a permanent secretariat. We've had it from the beginning. We had somebody who was working nearly half-time for the preparation of our nomination. Since we've been registered, we've kept the permanent secretariat. Now we have we still have one person, but she works more than part-time now on that secretariat. For 2 years now, we've been receiving a financial contribution from all the countries. So all the countries are paying a bit of money for the sites. This way we have enough money to fund the General Secretariat. This also allows us to conduct common projects at the international level. So we have a budget that helps us value some sites. So all the projects are not organized at the international level, but we have budget for the international projects.
Merci beaucoup. And from you,
Perfect, thank you.
Side, how is it organized for the Roots network?
Well, we have a management structure that we prepared before the inscription during the nomination process. Each state country have a national secretariat, which is my role. And we work with administrators, local administrators. All of us, most of us depend on ministries of culture of each of our countries. We always have budget problems. So usually the state, the national state or the regional state, the provinces, the departments have finance different projects, but from the state specifically. And we have an overarching management system, but no, we don't have, as we saw in other sites, a common scheme for the management plans, because we have different legislation. So we just have an overarching management system.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for sharing this experience.
Thank you very much.
There is always the budget is an issue, and we can understand that it's a challenge. And you, Miss Tamarlene, for the Lower Limes, Lower Germany Limes, please.
Yes, we have an international working group, and it's above it is an international steering group, but that will only come together when there are real problems. And in both countries, we have a coordinator. I think that's more or less the same as the secretariat. And in the Netherlands, that is my role. And my role is also to fit the ambitions to the available budget. So we don't have any problems because we fit them. No, that's just a joke. But we have budget, and that budget is coming from the 3 regional governments. I think in the question, there was also a question of the involvement of the national government. I think when in the Netherlands, the tentative list was reviewed, there was a precondition that sites could only be added if there would be regional ownership. So from that point of view, the national government isn't contributing financial, but it is supporting. So our UNESCO focal point is in fact in our working group. And if there are clear tasks that meet the national responsibility, they will take it as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Lin. Monsieur Kahn, est-ce que vous souhaitez intervenir ici sur l'organisation?
Mr. Kahn, would you like to intervene here? The intervention of a permanent secretariat for the sites in Senegal and Gambia? Make sure you turn your mic on, Mr. Kahn. My apologies. So I was saying that we have a common committee between the 2 countries. And this committee gathers the 2 countries in order to discuss projects, because one country does not take a decision without the agreement of the other, because we're talking here about a transnational serial property. And so it's true that internally within each country, we have some differences, but the 2 countries speak with just one voice. And so we really discussed on the development of each sites, and all state parties give a budget. And so this year we have some funds to help the people local, and to also work with partners. And this way we can create things in local areas. We can help women. We can also train young people to manage locally the sites, and therefore they can really work on these sites as well and preserve this. This is what I wanted to say concerning management with collaborating with the central administration that I represent. Thank you, Mr. Khan, and thank you to everyone for participating. I also would like to thank the previous speakers. We really had a comprehensive overview of the different issues and challenges of this kind of nomination. And so before giving the floor to Andine van Pachterbeek, to conclude, what I'd like to pinpoint here is that we have a strong cooperation movement in terms of scientific or technical point of view. And we see that if the site is present in different countries, then it has its place in World Heritage. We also mentioned all the implications and the importance of sharing practices and experience. We've talked about the different challenges. It's difficult to prepare, to organize the nomination, to manage the conservation. So yes, these are challenges. We need to have the budget, but when this works, it's quite outstanding to see what we are able to do. I would really like to thank the speakers again, and I now give the floor to Andy van Pachterbeek. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Maxime, Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I first would like to thank the World Heritage Center, ICOMOS as well. All of your contributions has enabled us to have more precision, and this dialogue was fruitful. This webinar was successful, and this webinar shows how important it is to exchange, but also that it's important to focus on the differences in opinions. I would like to underline the importance of having a collaboration between the different stakeholders, but also to have a solidarity. And a solidarity amongst the NGOs, the experts, and the state parties, which are all there to preserve the serial transnational property. Now, these cooperations do have challenges, but during this webinar, the examples showcase that it is possible and that it is something that is beneficial.
Nominated as serial transnational World Heritage to date. They are of the utmost importance because of the encouraging message they send to the international community, namely a message of valuable, meaningful, and fruitful cooperation and exchange between states and civil society. Of course, I cannot close these remarks without referring to Belgium's candidature to the World Heritage Committee for the period 2021-2025. This candidature precisely aims to continue to spread this message of dialogue and to implement it in the framework of the committee's work. As a matter of fact, Belgium, in all its linguistic and cultural diversity, has a long history of soundly managed cooperation and is therefore well suited for this role. We have always proved this at UNESCO and will continue to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been several questions throughout this webinar as to the registration of this webinar, which has indeed been recorded, and we can send you all the link. Secondly, we've also noticed that a lot of you are dealing with the same questions, which was to be expected. So for those who have agreed to have their contact information shared, we will share this and make this available to all of you so that you can be directly in contact, which is exactly the spirit of mutual aid and understanding that we want to share, and that is exactly the spirit of this convention. Finally, I would just like to thank you all for your participation and your attention, and hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Merci à tous. Merci. Au revoir.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice afternoon.